It's a new month, and hope is in the air for the days where you can sit out in the yard with a good book. And if contemplating your reading list right now is giving you the spring scaries, yes, that's a thing, Chris Hall from McNally Robinson Booksellers is here to assuage them with our March edition of What to Read. Good morning to you, Chris.
Good morning, Nolan.
So, first of all, before we get into these titles that you've brought for us today, we've got to extend some thanks to McNally Robinson on behalf of our schools that we went and read to for I Love to Read month. We had some incredible classrooms, and they absolutely loved the selections of the books. The big favorite was a title called The Fabulous Friend Machine, where some barnyard animals discover what they think is something that's going to bring them a lot of friends. Spoiler alert, it's a smartphone. And all of a sudden, all these hijinks ensue about, well, are these actually your friends? So that was very, very popular. Thank you so much to McNally for donating books to those schools' libraries, as well as part of our I Love to Read Month outreach. So
That's a great pleasure to participate in that. One of my favorite things is we work with the Moose, of course, and then you guys visiting schools, reading to kids. Nothing brings a bigger smile on my face.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. These titles that you've brought in this morning might not be the most smile-eliciting things, though. They are there's quite some dramatic titles within the five that you've brought for us this month. Why don't we start perhaps with something that is hard to imagine in this beautiful winter-ish weather that we're having, a dust storm that is conjured up by The Antidote by Karen Russell.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'll say, what were you expecting? By now, surely you know I don't bring, anyway, spring scaries. That's what I bring,
You can take that to the bank with you.
Yes,
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so yes, The Antidote. Karen Russell, another of our favorites. She is our author of the month in March, in fact.
Okay.
She wrote a book a few years ago now called Swamplandia! And a follow-up with Vampires in the Lemon Grove. And you can take it from those titles what kind of novel that you're in for. So this new one, it opens on Black Sunday, which is a real event in Western Canada as well, but this is set in the U.S. A historic dust storm. It ravages the fictional town of Ooze, Nebraska. And Ooze is already collapsing, essentially. It's under the weight of the Great Depression and these dust ravaging the Dust Bowl, but also the violence of its own history. And so there's a figure in this novel, she refers to herself as the Prairie Witch, but she is the antidote. And you stay with me here, but her body serves as a bank vault for people's memories and secrets.
Wow.
So you can literally, if something's bothering you in your memory, you can take it to her, tell her about it. She keeps it. You never think about it again. You completely forget about it.
Wow.
And so there's a young basketball star. She wants to become a prairie witch, a witch's apprentice. She's trying to deal with the grief from her death of her mother. There's a photographer whose time-traveling camera threatens to reveal both the town's future and past, as well as its of the secrets in there. It's a bit of a crazy novel, but there's something in this trope of being able to forget the things that you don't want to remember that, may not surprise anyone that it comes back to bite them a little bit. But they do this individually, they do this collectively, and this one kind of unrealistic element of this novel really makes you think about what happens when these things. Yeah,
So
very
much,
thought-provoking anyway.
So much danger in that, in forgetting history, something that we're appreciating more and more, I think, in society
I think
these
so
days.
too. I think that's exactly what she's on. Yeah.
How does McNally Robinson go about choosing an author of the month, as Karen Russell is for March?
Well, that's an interesting question. Deep negotiations. We have a meeting every month where we decide what we're going to do 2 months forward.
Okay.
And so part of that is what are the books coming out that we're interested in and which authors are there that we're kind of keen on, somebody in the room is keen on, or we know somebody in the bookstore is keen on. And yeah, somebody gets chosen in that. We're not looking for the biggest name that you already know about. We're
Sure.
kinda looking for somebody where, Karen Russell, ever heard of her? She's kind of neat. Give her a try.
I'm imagining like a round table where everyone's like yelling across as like some sort of big council or something to that effect.
Well, there's plenty of banter, I'll tell you that.
Oh, I would imagine. In a similar vein, speaking of like how we handle information kind of coming into a community, whether we forget it or how we how it impacts us as a community. Why don't we talk about Twist by Colum McCann?
Sure, absolutely. Colum McCann, he wrote a book, it's probably 10 years ago by now, called Let the Great World Spin. And when I read it, I was just blown away by it. I really liked it. It was about various New Yorkers living their individual mundane lives. And in the background is Philippe Petit. He famously walked the tightrope between the World Trade Center buildings. Like, if you've ever heard of that, it's amazing. And so that's happening in the background of these people who are just kind of buying milk and going about their day. It's really an interesting juxtaposition.
Ordinary amongst the extraordinary.
Yeah, exactly. And so McCann is Irish by birth, but he creates a couple of Irish characters in this new one. Anthony Fennell is a journalist assigned to cover the story of underwater fiber optic cables. They carry the world's information, but sometimes they break and they're far below the surface of the ocean. So his story takes him to West Africa. He discovers literally the human labor behind that veneer of our technological world, and he meets a fellow, John Conway, the chief of a ship, that cable repair ship, and he ends up accompanying John on this boat. They go off to repair a series of breaks, and while at sea, don't want to give much of the plot away here,
indeed.
But let's just say they're forced to face some of the basic questions in their lives, and questions about how we connect, about the perils of severed connections. It reminds me of what I just said about the antidote. There's this metaphor centrally that it's almost like the setup, but the life of the story is really in the characters and their thoughts and how it resonates with the reader. It's a great novel.
Yeah, a novel about that connection between different places through technology and how information can impact those connections and what happens when those connections are severed miles underneath the sea.
Are those phones our friends, as we
indeed
just discussed?
Exactly. Those are not such fabulous friend machines after all. You know what? I'm sensing you always claim you don't do this on purpose when you're in here. But I see another sort of a build on what the impact of information is in this next title, Theft by Abdurrazak Gurnah.
Yes, I don't know what those connections are. Maybe some therapy is required. But anyway, Gurnah, he won the Nobel Prize 2021, and this is his first new novel since that win. He's originally from Tanzania. He's emigrated to UK as a young man. He's lived there since. And he explores in his novels the effects of colonialism and a lot about the fates of the refugee and the immigrant. They always find themselves caught between cultures, caught between places, and all the struggles that ensue from that. This new novel, it involves 3 young people coming of age in Tanzania. Kareem returns to his sleepy hometown. He's been to university. He's got a new swagger and ambition. Fozia glimpses in him a chance of escape. She's had a smothering upbringing, and the two of them offer a haven for a fellow named Badar. He's poor, and he's unsure whether the future holds anything at all for him. So while they're all trying to work out their personal journeys, this is set earlier in the 20th century, tourism, technology, all of the opportunities and threats that come with them, they reach their quiet corner of the world in Tanzania, and these characters have to take matters into their own hands, trying to find their own ways. It's this novel is where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Like, that story just sounds kind of but you're in the hands of a world-class storyteller here. I've talked about this before on this show, where you're just enthralled in a very simple story sometimes. And this is Nobel Prize caliber. He is a world-class storyteller.
I was just going to say a former winner of the Nobel Prize in literature. But we were talking before with Twist about that extraordinary, that tightrope walk between the two World Trade Center buildings amidst people buying milk. And this is perhaps, instead of extraordinary juxtaposed with ordinary, this is extraordinary in the ordinary, which is brought out by by this master storyteller.
I think so.
Another story that maybe talks about how people from different parts of society have to band together. You're talking about the Paris Express by Emma Donoghue.
Emma Donoghue, yes, she's no stranger to us. She's been to the store many times. We're great fans. Room would be her best-known book, but she's also wrote The Wonder, The Pull of the Stars. There's many others. She's really at her best, in my opinion, in her historical novels, and this is another historical setting. She takes as a starting place the real 1890 1895 French railway disaster. It's an event that was famously documented in dramatic photographs. You can look them up. The train didn't stop in time and literally barreled out of the wall of the train station in Paris. And there are photographs of an engine hanging out of the second story over the street. Yeah, it's quite dramatic. So this novel is the story of that train ride. It starts in Normandy. She traces it over that single day of that journey and explores various passenger stories. An anarchist bent on destruction to a pregnant woman fleeing her home village for the anonymity of the big city. There's a black American painter who feels that France is better, but still not great compared to his home. The railwaymen who are devoted to the train and getting it there on time. It's really a series of character sketches. She manages to take this setting, and it really becomes a microcosm of the day late in the 19th century. All the politics, all the fears, all the chaos, and even though we know how the journey ends, there's still a suspense about it because the characters don't know. And so it's a kind of an inverse of what you would normally consider suspenseful.
Sure. Well, I mean, you have, in a similar vein, as you have the Industrial Revolution taking hold and you have information being able to be shared, again, in a quicker setting, you then have the results of different kinds of connection, but also you then have, again, another representation of the pitfalls that come when that technology perhaps goes awry.
Sure.
So all of the sort of disconnects that we've talked about in the previous 4 books, they kind of all come to a head in this last title that you're going to talk about, which talks about the sort of ultimate connector, not only of people, but also for all life on Earth. And that is Paul Hawken's exploration of carbon.
Carbon, yes. Subtitle is called The Book of Life, right to what you were saying. He is a well-known climate writer and thinker, author of books like Regeneration and The Ecology of Commerce. And yeah, this is a book about the most essential component of the climate crisis, something we hear about all the time but probably don't know that well, carbon. He looks at the flow of life through the lens of carbon. It's essential to life, as you point out. It extends into every single corner of existence and shapes the entire fabric of life, really. He charts the course over the planet's history. He takes us through the worlds of plants, animals, insects, fungi, food, and farms. And he points out all of the subtle connections between carbon and our collective human experience. And he challenges us, really. He says we need to see nature, carbon, and ourselves as intertwined and inseparably connected. So there are history books that take one component like cod or salt or something and tell the story of that component, and it brings the whole world together in an interesting way. This reminded me of that a little bit. The whole world is like really centered on this one piece. One of the questions we always get about environmental books is it preachy? I'd say no, this isn't preachy. This is more, think of it as a science book more. It's about the facts. It's about how the world works. And yes, it becomes fairly obvious that we need to pay attention to this in the course of his explanations.
It occurs to me as you're having those conversations about environmental books and people ask if it's preachy, I wonder if people are looking for titles that are, I'm trying to think of another word for preachy, but like they don't want just like the facts kind of laid out for them. There has to be a way in which to draw them into that space of speaking about climate change in very frank and very honest sorts of terms.
Absolutely, yeah, because it could become very dry and dusty as well. So and it's not unrelated to storytelling as we were just describing it, right? This is obviously nonfiction, but at the same time, you've got to pull people along, you've got to keep them engaged, and so there are skills to that too. And yeah, Paul Hawken has plenty of them. 5
engaging titles for March for what to read. Those titles again: Carbon by Paul Hawken, The Paris Express by Emma Donoghue, Theft by Abdurazak Gurnah, Twist by Colin McCann, and The Antidote by Karen Russell. We'll have a full breakdown of all of these titles later on this morning at our website, classic107.com, and on the Classic 107 app. Also, I did not realize this, Chris, but when I was at the McNally Robinson Booksellers location on Grant, there's also a very helpful display when you walk in the front doors that has all of these titles laid out in a nice, convenient fashion. So once you walk inside McNally Robinson, you can find what to read selections for the month all conveniently placed together for your reading pleasure.
As the books release, they get added to it, so you're most up to date with that display.
All the more reason to go visit them at their Grant Avenue location. Also, of course, go and check them out at The Forks, or of course on their website. Chris Hall, thank you for another great bunch of selections for March, and thank you for telling us what to read.
Great pleasure. Thank you, Nolan.